Friends, here we are. Don't know if we started yet. Live video is starting. Shalom friends, here we are, Light of Infinite Festival. So I can't see my video. I don't know if anyone's watching my video, but I'm just going to start speaking. Bezos Hashem, and we're going to share some ideas. My name's Dov Bear, Rabbi Dov Cohen from Jerusalem, and I love festivals. Before I looked like this, I grew up in England, not religious, spiritually seeking perhaps, and I went to lots of festivals, Glastonbury being the world's largest dance festival, 4-5 day dance festival in a farm in southern England with some of the top music acts, Cypress Hill and Bob Dylan one year, saw Bob Dylan. And I was a dance music DJ as well in clubs in Manchester University and in the Cambridge end of year ball. I played 2 years in a row, 5 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. set, hard, happy house and drum and bass. And I did all the mind-altering things that come along with that sort of lifestyle. And I wanted to go and see the world, what's going on, what am I meant to achieve, and how can I find happiness and peace and a sense of self and sweetness and goodness in life. So I didn't think Western culture had much to offer. I didn't think Judaism has much to offer. So I I went to Asia. I lived in Asia for 6 years. It says here some action is needed, too low FPS. I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to take that action. Bezos Hashem, we'll do what we can do. So I went to lots of 10-day silent meditation retreats in Thailand and India, and I got a black belt in Taekwondo and a brown belt in Aikido, and I worked in lots of orphanages, and I did yoga retreats in Rishikesh in India, and I was really searching for spirituality. And I remember really saying this idea, and I hear it quite a lot, I'm spiritual, not religious. I'm spiritual, not religious. I always said that because for me religion is really like dogmatic and male chauvinistic and man-made and ritualistic and not really spiritual. And I wasn't into that. I was into being very open and what resonates with me, man, this resonates with me. As long as I'm not hurting other people and I can feel it in my meditation and it resonates with me, that's what's true. It's true because it resonates with me. But as I started learning more, I was obviously reading some Osho, and Osho says some things, but Buddhism says other things, and the truth is that Hinduism and Buddhism teach fundamentally different truths. Hinduism says there's a soul, you are a soul, and Buddhism says there isn't a soul, you're not a soul, and it's all impermanent, dukkha, anicca, anatta, non-self. So I started realizing, just because it resonates with me, does that really mean it's true? Because I'll take a bit from here and I'll take a bit from there and I'll create my own kind of spirituality. But then I realized, hold on, maybe there is an actual truth. Maybe there's a truth that I'm meant to be tapping into. So rather than something being true because it resonates with me, I thought maybe there is a truth and I need to align myself in order to resonate with it. So it was an immense paradigm shift, because it wasn't about me and what feels good to me and what's right, is what's the right thing, what does God want from me. So I realized actually to be religious is takes an immense amount of humility, because I'm not making the rules anymore. It's not about me. I'm not in the center. I'm standing back and I'm saying, you know what, God knows better. So what does God want from me? So it was a very big paradigm shift for me. And I realized that it's not a choice. You don't have to choose between spiritual and being religious. You can be religious and spiritual at the same time. So I really wanted to do that, and I was a truth seeker. What is the truth? What do I have to live in line with? And then I came back to Judaism, and I saw the sweetness and the beauty and the truth of the Torah, and walked the whole length of Israel in 40 days to raise money for orphanages and integrate more the knowledge that I'd learned. And very slowly I grew a beard, and here I am now. So tonight we're talking about ayahuasca and psychedelics in general, because everyone's speaking about it now, and I think it's a very important subject. It's something we have to look into, but I'm coming through it from the lens of Torah. What's the Torah? What's the religion of ayahuasca? And so the discussion isn't whether it works or not, or whether psychedelics work or not. By the way, I assume they do. I think they do. I've definitely had psychedelic experiences. I lived in England, which is close to Amsterdam. So we used to go across there and we used to do our things. So I've experienced very high spiritual levels and spiritual consciousness. And I have no doubt that if I were to do ayahuasca, then it would shift me up many, many gears of spirituality, and my Shachris, Mincha, and Maariv would be better, and I'd speak to Hashem. And I think that not only spiritually psychedelics work, but also mentally, psychologically, to heal trauma. I have students who were rather dysfunctional people, actually, and they took ayahuasca, and they don't want to do it again, but it really gave them a big shift. I don't think it's a miracle cure. I know other people who had negative experience. I heard a story of someone who actually was having some marital problems and did ayahuasca and then divorced his wife and left his 3 children. And I don't think that's necessarily a healthy thing. But for now, I'm just going to assume, let's say it works. It works. Spiritually, psychologically, it works. That's not my question anymore in my life. My question isn't what works for me, what resonates for me. My question is, what does God want from me? What's the truth? What's the right thing to do? And the only way we can do that is really look into the Torah. What's the Torah philosophy behind these things? We say every morning, by the way, when we're talking about the ketores, we're making the incense. It says there that you're not allowed to add honey to the incense. And why aren't you allowed honey? Why not? Basically, it says if you did put honey in the incense, it would be such an intense spiritual experience that you just couldn't deal with it. You just leave your body. It would be the highest spirituality you could ever do. So that's great. That's what I'm here for. Surely I'm here to have high spiritual experiences and connect to God and see the oneness of all creation. And if these things are going to help me do that, I'll do that. But it says that you're not allowed to do it. And then it says, why aren't you allowed to do it? And the answer is very simple, because the Torah says don't do it. The Torah says that's not what I want you to do. Just because it works doesn't mean that's what you have to do. And by the way, the word dvash in Hebrew, it means honey, dvash. The Vilna Gaon, one of our holy sages, says dvash stands for 3 words, Deya, Bina, Seichel, which is awareness and contemplation and intellect. And it's saying, you know what, just because you've worked it out that it seems to be the best thing for me and good for me, you don't necessarily know what's best for you. And the divine creator of the universe who loves you and gave you the guidebook and wants the best for you and is invested in you and knows you better than you know yourself, the divine creator is saying, it's not what we want. So we've got to work out, is this what we want? So the first thing in Torah philosophy is really the purpose of creation. Carl Jung, I used to study lots of philosophy. Carl Jung very famously said, especially in this conversation we're having now, you should beware of unearned wisdom. If you didn't earn it, just be careful. And this taps into a fundamental idea in Jewish philosophy, which is the idea of Nahama de Kisufa. Nahama de Kisufa means the bread of shame. So it goes like this. The soul was up there in divine bliss, God consciousness, and it had this relationship with God, with the ultimate soul, but didn't earn it, didn't work for it. So it couldn't really appreciate the relationship, because if you don't put in effort in order to create the relationship, it's not the highest level of relationship. So God creates the universe and says, okay, soul, I'm going to put you into the universe for 100 or so years, however long it's going to be. And the purpose of you being down there is to work and put in effort. Lefum tzara agra. According to the effort, so is the reward, so is the gain. So I want you to work for spirit, to get to a high spiritual level and have a palpable, authentic relationship with me. And it's hard work. So we have this idea that we don't want to take shortcuts, even if they work. I'm not going to do something to boost me when really I've got to put it in the work. The idea I think of is really at the Olympic Games. If I took steroids, then I'd be much stronger and I'd run much, much, much faster. But that's not the point of the games. The game is to see how strong a human being can come from their natural, personal own efforts. So if someone did do steroids, and they won the 100 meters dash in the Olympic Games, and it was the world record score, and they stood on the podium, and they did run faster than anyone else ever, and it was an amazing feeling, and it was the champion. But much later on, maybe they even passed away. People found out that they did steroids, then it all gets taken away. It didn't mean anything, because if you cheat, it's not called the real thing. So we have this idea of Nahamadikasufa. You've got to put in the work yourself. So I'm a little bit worried. I'm just really sharing my own thought process, by the way. I'm not telling anyone what to do. But I'm a little bit worried that if I did do something, if I took ayahuasca and I was davening much better and I was more spiritual and more connected to Hashem, it'd feel great in Olam Hazeh, in this world, but I'd get up to Olam Haba afterwards and Hashem would say, Dovi Bear, I gave you tools, I gave you I gave you Jewish meditation, I gave you mitzvahs, I gave you prayer, I gave you many different methods, and I wanted you to use them. I didn't want that. So I'll go back, and I wouldn't have earned my reward, which is, in a way, really missing the whole point of life, which is to come down here and earn it, with your own effort. I also think of the idea of, is it better to climb halfway up a mountain, and you put in the effort and you're really climbing halfway up the mountain, or get a helicopter to the top of the mountain? So I believe Jewish wisdom says rather make your own effort, get halfway up in your own effort rather than getting the helicopter to the top, because the purpose isn't to get to the top. It's actually one of my favorite Torahs. There's a beautiful idea in Parshas Vayera. Parshas Vayera, Avram Avinu, Abraham our forefather, he's sitting in the entrance of his tent. He's sitting in the entrance of his tent, and he's basically with Hashem. Hashem comes and visits him. Now, it's the only time I can see in the whole Torah where it doesn't say that Hashem said anything. It's just like he's in bliss, God, consciousness, samadhi, devekas, the highest level of consciousness beyond his body with Hashem. So that's pretty good, because surely the whole point of life is to be with Hashem, is to have these very, very high mystical spiritual experiences and be with Hashem. But we see what happens, that these three travelers come along. They got dirty feet, and Avram basically says to Hashem, no Hashem, it's very Israeli Avram, no Hashem, you don't mind? I'm going to serve these travelers now. So he stops. So he steps out of this very, very high level of consciousness, and he goes and he serves them, and he gives them food, and he gives them drink, and there's a lot more Torah behind this. But it really teaches us that the purpose of life in this world is not to be with Hashem. Our purpose in life isn't to have these high spiritual experiences. Our purpose in life is not to be with Hashem. Our purpose in life is to be like Hashem. To be like Hashem. To bring ourselves in line with the character traits, to be loving and compassionate and sweet. So it's got really nothing to do, in a way, with my own spiritual experience. It's very nice. I think Abraham would have had personally a much more pleasurable spiritual experience just chilling out with Hashem in God bliss consciousness than running around serving these travelers. But Abraham knew it's not about my spiritual levels, it's about being a mensch. Can't just sit and be a mensch. So although we do say it's good to have a high level of consciousness, to take something, to whatever it is, any drug, and take something and then boost up, we're actually not that into quick, intense experience. We're very slow. It's called, in Kabbalah, it's called Ratzov Vashav, running and returning. So we can reach very high levels, but we need to build up to them. That's called healthy growth. To go from 0 to 500 very quickly and experience crazy changing, it's not really something we're so much into in Judaism. So we really got to understand this. It's less about us. It's less about us and what do we have to do. What am I meant to do? By the way, it's not just Judaism. Every spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama and Eckhart Tolle and Sadhguru, and you know what, even Ram Dass, Richard Alpert himself, who kind of started, he was one of the founders of the whole psychedelic movement. He says, you don't need it. Real spirituality doesn't rely on these things. Ram Dass himself says when he got to India and he found his guru, he really regretted it, and he said it actually completely slowed down his spiritual work, and he wished he hadn't done it. Says Ram Dass himself. So that all the big boys in spirituality, they're like, stay clear of this stuff. It definitely works. It's very powerful and beautiful, but we're here to put in our effort and just do the work like a mensch. So I feel that I actually heard that there are some rabbis taking Ritalin just to daven mincha with more concentration. And it's like, that's very sweet, but God would rather have your honest and pure mincha with a little bit less concentration than this influenced mincha. So it's a very powerful idea for me to say, you know what, I'd rather be on a lower spiritual level, but I made it myself and I earned it and I did the work, than be on this very high level that I didn't really, do anything for. So once again, just because it works, we don't do it. Like if someone has low self-esteem, you don't say, well, just have a line of Coke before you go out, just a little one. It will make you feel it works. Obviously, it's very different because Coke is very addictive and stuff, whereas most of these natural psychedelics like ayahuasca probably aren't. And I know people who just do it once. But that's the first idea, lefum tzara agra, according to the effort, so the reward. The second thing I was thinking about is that there's a halacha, there's a rule, a law, a Jewish law that says you're actually not allowed to daven mincha when you're drunk. You're not allowed to daven mincha when you're drunk. And I'm like, what do you mean? When I get drunk, my davening is so good. I feel so much more open and connected to Hashem. And I'm like, I can express myself much better and I can often concentrate much better. Purim, my davening is great. But then I thought of an idea. Imagine I go out with my mates one night and I'm just downing vodkas and I'm like, chug, 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 chug. And I'm like, and I get really wasted. Now, I love my wife. My wife is amazing. She's an energy healer and a yoga teacher and an artist and an aromatherapist. My wife's amazing. I love her. So let's say I come back home from the pub. I've had my beers. And I see my wife there and I'm like, oh, I love you so much. I love you. I'm so happy and grateful that you're my wife. Now, do I really love her? Of course I really love her. Am I having a real experience of feeling my love for my wife? Yeah, of course I am. Am I expressing it really from my heart? Of course I am. Does my wife want me anywhere near her? Absolutely not. She's like, I'm sorry, that's not how the relationship works. So I sometimes think to myself, really with everything, with weed or whatever we say, I feel much closer. I feel so connected to Hashem and I can talk better. Just because we feel closer and feel more connected to Hashem doesn't mean we are more connected to Hashem. That's just what we feel. Once again, it's very self-centered. I'm gonna do the avoda. I'm gonna do the work that resonates and makes me feel good. But Hashem says, no, actually there's a way to do it. And Hashem's really given us this guidebook. He's given us a way. Mitzvahs. The word mitzvah we know comes from the word tzavta, which it doesn't mean grandmother, that's safta. Tzavta means a connection point. A mitzvah is a way to connect to your soul. That's what it's meant to be. Obviously, if you just rush through it and you're doing out of fear and guilt and habit and whatever it is, it's not going to do that. But the mitzvahs are lights. By the way, the word for lights in Hebrew is orot, which is numerical value 613. And there's 613 mitzvahs. There are 613 lights that are connecting us. So Hashem says, here's the guidebook. I want you to connect to me. I want you to connect to my soul. Nothing written in the guidebook is for Hashem. Hashem doesn't need me to put on tefillin. Hashem doesn't need me to daven. Hashem doesn't need me to put on my right shoe first and then my left shoe. That's not. Hashem says, I'm the loving creator. I want this for you because this is advice. I always, after doing martial arts a lot, I always saw Hashem as like the ultimate martial arts master. And my master used to beat me up. My master in China, when I was training in Shaolin, used to smack the back of our leg with a bamboo stick. And he didn't do that for his own benefit. He did it for my benefit. I would have beaten him up if I could, but I couldn't because he was a Shaolin master. But the truth is that any master, any teacher, any mentor, when they tell you what to do, it's not for their own good. It's for you to reach your ultimate potential. So this is why the Zohar, the fundamental book of Kabbalah, teaches that the mitzvahs are eaten. 613 pieces of advice. Hashem says, this is my advice to you. Take it or leave it. You're not a bad person if you don't do it, but I'm telling you what's good for you. These are the things that connect you to your soul. By the way, spirituality in Judaism is only connecting to, identifying as, manifesting and living through your soul. That's what the Torah is a guidebook to tell us. That's how you be spiritual. So smoking weed and doing yoga on the beach at sunrise feels very, and being gluten-free and sugar-free. By the way, I'm making fun of myself because I'm gluten-free and sugar-free. So, and I used to smoke weed and do yoga on the beach and stuff. Anyway, but that's spirituality with a small s. But real spirituality is connecting to your soul. And the way we connect to our soul is through mitzvahs. So, in fact, if you really think about it like this, to say I'm spiritual but not religious, it doesn't make sense from a Torah standpoint, because the Torah, the religion, is the guidebook in order to experience real spirituality. You can't be spiritual if you aren't doing the mitzvahs, act real, connect to your soul. So I'm spiritual, not religious, doesn't even make sense. So I'm religious and spiritual. By the way, I know religious people who are not spiritual at all. And the people who are spiritual, not religious, are much nicer to hang out with, and they're much more fun. But we can do both. We can be religious and spiritual at the same time. So at the moment, that's where I'm really holding. I'm holding the Fum Tara Agra. I see a comment here. I'm going to talk about trauma and ADHD and stuff. 100%, we're going to get onto that. At the moment, I'm just talking about the use of these things just to have a high spiritual experience. There's really two uses. One is high spiritual experience, and the other one is to treat trauma and ADHD. I'm going to definitely speak about that, what the Torah says about that. For now, I'm just concentrating on, I just feel like connecting, I want to connect more, be spiritual and great. Fine. So, our Masorah doesn't have room for this. It's not, the Baba Sali was not doing ayahuasca or any psychedelics, and nor was the Chavetz Chaim, and nor was the Baal Shem Tov, and nor was the Arizal and the Vilna Gaon and the Rambam and anyone ever. It's just not part of what it's foreign. It's very foreign to our avoda. It's not what we're doing. And I've noticed that the people that I've spoken to who are really kind of promoting this, they're experts, they're thought leaders in the world of human psychology and in consciousness, and they're immense healers. But in terms of Das Torah, are they holding in Torah? I don't even see myself. I've only been in yeshiva for 14 years now. I haven't even seen the whole of Shas. I haven't even seen a little bit of Shas. So even my opinion, when it really comes to what does the Torah want from me, and what does God want from me, I don't even think my opinion is that authoritative. Actually, I have a new student, amazing, high conscious, amazing individual, and he showed me this article he wrote, beautifully written. He's got an immense talent for writing, and he said how the tree in the Garden of Eden, the Eitz Das Torah, was a psychedelic tree. How do you know? Because it changed your consciousness. The knowledge of good and evil. It's a complete consciousness change, and that's why God said, if you eat it, then you'll experience death. And what does that mean? Ego death, which is exactly what it's going to do. And then the snake represents transformation, and so they transform themselves, and then they got attuned with their body. And he wrote it in such a beautiful way. The truth is, though, that it's exactly the opposite. For example, even if it was a psychedelic tree, it wasn't ego death. It was exactly the opposite. It was the birth of ego. That's where ego is born. The snake said to Chava, if you eat it, you'll be like Hashem. Chava should have just said, I'm already like Hashem. Chelek Eloka mimal mamish. I'm a piece of Hashem. You can't trick me. But the snake's voice was, you created separation between us and Hashem, and that's the birth of the ego, which is spiritual death. And the snake in Jewish tradition doesn't represent transformation. It represents the voice of the ego. That is the ego. We're very, very wary of snake. My wife's a yoga teacher, but things like Kundalini yoga and empowering that snake energy, we're very careful about the snake. It doesn't really represent transformation. The snake, it sheds its skin, sheds its old skin, but it just comes back as a snake. It didn't really transform. It just empowered itself as a snake. And they didn't align with their bodies at that point. They became ashamed of their bodies at that point. So when you get someone who's not really holding in understanding Das Torah, what does Torah really teach us, they can say beautiful things, but they don't have the authority or the knowledge to say that. So I've spoken to many poskim and Mekubalim, the biggest, holiest, most conscious Torah experts and giants and geniuses in the world, and they're all one voice across the board that this is not our way. Some people just say it's actually forbidden. Mekubalim say it's tameh. It's actually tameh. It's like eating pig. Even if it works, you're actually you're spiritually damaging yourself. Even though you feel more spiritual for the rest of your life, and your mincha's better, and you're a nicer person, it's changed everything, you've actually damaged yourself spiritually. So, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to talk about this very important thing that Joshua Matthew Greenberg mentioned. There's another side to psychedelics, which is healing. Healing as a medicine. And I've spoken to a posek, spoken to poskim, and they say yes. Is there a place for ayahuasca in Judaism? Yes, there is. It's just a very small one. A very small place is when there is someone who is highly dysfunctional, highly traumatized, whatever it is they went through. And they've really tried everything else. They really tried. They went to therapy. We have methods. We have emunah therapy and Jewish mindfulness and mitzvahs. I work with many, many people. I run a Jewish mindfulness online course. Actually, there's one starting on June the 12th. litmindfulness.org. L-I-T mindfulness.org. And I've managed, Baruch Hashem, to really heal very, very deeply wounded people through consistent self-compassion and emunah and mindfulness and self-nurture. And I really believe that probably 95% of people with the right guidance and the right support and the right knowledge and the right tools and the right encouragement can really break through on their own. But yes, we say there is a place. My father, he should lived very, very long and very, very healthy, has cancer, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and he tried everything. He was in a lot of pain, tried everything, these painkillers, he went in a hospice, he did everything, and eventually someone said, just try THC. So he tried that. There's a place for it. So to just smoke weed so you can get a bit high is not our thing. But when you're in this immensely challenging situation where there's no other option, and it helps him a bit. I think he needs to up his dosage a bit, but it's helping. Be'ezrat Hashem, Yosef ben Menucha should mamish live very, very many more years of tshuva and health and wellness. So I think this gets into a bit of a grey area. At what point and who diagnoses who is dysfunctional enough? Because everyone's a bit dysfunctional. Everyone's got some anxiety and childhood stuff and relationship issue, but we've got to be very, very slow and very, very careful to just prescribe things. I think ADHD medicine is a good example, actually. I ran a trip for 14-year-old Americans, 65 kids. I think 43 of them were on medication. So maybe they needed it, but I think there's a very quick, let's just jump and medicate. So seeing as we say it's not really part of our tradition, and we should avoid it if we can, it's the last resort. So for me, that's where the debate's going to be. At what point do we say someone's dysfunctional enough, and at what point do we say that they've really, really tried enough? And that's where I'm going to I'd be happy to be in the debate. By the way, if someone can prove to me that the Torah isn't actually true, and that even if the Torah is true, the sages aren't the authority figures, and that their opinions don't really count, and all of the Das Torah that I'm living my life by isn't relevant. Now, if you can really prove that to me, that's great. I'll do ayahuasca tomorrow. I think I'd run great healing circles to heal many, many, many people. This guy actually said, who was talking about the Garden of Eden, he said, no, but they would be allowed to eat from the tree had they just waited until Shabbat. So it shows you can. And then I was like, whoa, that's actually an amazing idea. Because we say when Mashiach comes, at the end of the days, when Mashiach comes, it will be Yom Shekulo Shabbos. It's going to be Shabbos. So maybe when Mashiach comes, then we can all be doing ayahuasca. That's maybe another good reason to be yearning and praying for the imminent arrival of the Mashiachs. So basically, that's the conclusions I came to. My thought process is, I'd rather be on a lower level that I earned, and I'd rather make sure I'm really connecting to Hashem by using Hashem's tools. Hashem says, this is what we do. We do mitzvahs, we do prayer, we do meditation, we do acts of kindness. It's not about my spiritual high experiences. It's about what impact and effect can I bring into the world, Bezrat Hashem, and always bearing in mind that there is definitely a place for it, but it's very subtle, and we've got to know exactly when, where, how. Be'ez Hashem, we should all be healed, we should all be connected, we should all be loving and non-judgmental and come together and Be'ez Hashem have the final revelation and the redemption. Be'ez Hashem, next year in Jerusalem.